Charles Oliveira, boy, I would love to come and give you guys an X's and O's and break this thing down. I mean, there was so much mixed martial arts that happened in Charles's win over Gamrot. They punched and they kicked and they wrestled. They defensively wrestled. He defended punch. He defended kicks. They get on the ground. He goes for two different submissions. One where he just got his leg over, but another one where he's going for an omoplata. It's not how I saw the fight. It's not how I saw the story of this fight in terms of, what happened. Oh, Charles is wrestling. Turned out to be better than we thought it was. All of that's true. I don't dismiss anyone that suggests that. I'm just saying it's not how I saw the story of this fight. The story of this fight for me wasn't physical. It was mental. It was this mental approach. And you'll hear guys that tell you all the time. And they sound cool when they say it. And it's even largely the accepted belief within sports, which is, it's mental, not physical. The only person I have to beat is myself. You must have confidence. And the problem is, it's not true. The problem is there's nothing, as a matter of fact, nothing that's accurate about that statement. There is nothing that the referee looks for before he might call a TKO, a submission, or a knockout. The three things a referee can do to stop the fight. There is nothing that the judges, under a 10-9 must system, will look at when scoring a fight that has anything to do with how you feel. Whether you're confident, whether you're hurt, whether you're healthy, whether you trained hard, whether your mother loved you more than the opponent's mother loved them. There is nothing. It is all physical. Not how do you feel? What did you do? And I tell you that all of society has changed in that way. When I was growing up, the gold standard of reality is what happened. Now the gold standard of reality has changed to how did it make you feel? And I only share with you that sometimes it is true, such as now, but that's actually the outlier. Charles was knocked out in his last fight. Bad. And it wasn't overly competitive. Charles has really never been whipped before. You could argue that Islam didn't whip him before in terms of, walking right through him. Islam was very dominant, and those things are true, but it was a 7.5 to 8 minute fight. It wasn't as though Charles didn't give a resistance. I was on a card with Charles, young Charles. I believe he was 24 years old. He fought on an undercard, fought a young man named Jim Miller. And Charles had come in with this huge reputation. Some were saying that they believed he was the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioner to ever transfer over and start to do MMA. I mean, these are very big compliments, which made it an even bigger deal when Jim Miller tapped him out with a knee bar. And by the way, it was a straight knee bar. It was a very basic knee bar. So I saw these versions of Charles. But Charles gets knocked out and Charles gets whipped. Okay? Two things you got to come back from. And in boxing, a guy is never the same after he gets knocked out. That's very well-known stereotype, generalism, but very well-known generalism. And it does carry over to MMA to a degree. Not quite as perfectly as it does to boxing, but to a degree. So Charles has all of these things, and not to mention, he's fighting at home. Now, there's a home court advantage in basketball. There's a home field advantage in football. It is not true in MMA. It is a disadvantage to be fighting in front of the people whose opinions you care about the most. So, but historically not for Charles. As a matter of fact, this is Charles' 7th fight in Brazil. He's undefeated. He's never lost in Brazil, at any rate. So then you have the last minute opponent. And that's a terrible matchup for Charles. Gamrot is a terrible matchup. Now, it's good news in that Gamrot doesn't have these big, heavy hands, and you're worried about a knockout, and you're worried, where a guy's mind is like. In that one and only regard was Gamrot a good idea. Gamrot is a monster. Okay. Charles looks so good. I mean, Volkanovski just showed us. Volkanovski is many people's pick for not just the greatest, for the greatest ever. And Volkanovski just showed us how important it is to not come back, not rush yourself back after a knockout. He showed us how important it is to have breaks. And if you just look at Charles's last fight, it was against Ilia Topuria, but Ilia Topuria, who did the same thing last that Charles did, right? I mean, he fought on the same night in the same way. It was Charles's opponent. Ilia's not only not fought, not gone through training camp, Ilia's not scheduled to fight. As a matter of fact, there will be no announcement on Ilia Topuria at a minimum until next year. So I think you start to understand how fast Charles turned around, right? Ilia won the fight and Ilia needed a break. Ilia won the fight and Ilia took a break. Charles lost the fight and didn't take the break. This is a very big deal. It really is a very big deal. And there's not a whole lot of things that you see in sport that you can call inspiring. It is everybody's greatest goal. All of the pundits, all the fans. The number one reason they show up is to see something that would actually inspire them and make them feel better about themselves. But it's uncommon. It's not expected. It's a treat when it happens. But I would put what Charles did, I would go as far as to call it inspiring. And Daniel Cormier had made a very compelling conversation earlier today. And he was talking about when you have the greats, and Charles is a world champion and future Hall of Famer, he qualifies as one of the greats. But when you have the greats, their career generally starts off on fire, and that fire starts to dim out. The greats lose a handful of matches. The greats lose 4 of their last 5 matches. Very common thing, but it's on the back end of their career. It's after they've stayed in it too long. It's after their glorious moments are gone. We've really never seen someone like Charles, where the bumps were young. The bumps were early. The bumps were first. In fact, I can't think of anybody that was like that. Anthony Smith had a record at one point. It was like 12 wins and 7 losses. But these weren't in the octagon, right? You guys didn't see these. This was when he was still working the kinks out before he emerged. So aside from that one example I just gave of Anthony, I can't think of anybody who made their mistakes early and worked it out. There's only been one athlete that I've ever seen in the octagon specifically that got better with age, and that was Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler used to be this guy that was going to bring a storm, but if you made it to the second round, your chances changed immensely. If you made it to the third round, if you made it to the second half of the third round, you were even likely to win the fight. And then all of a sudden, Robbie goes 5 rounds and wins the 4th and 5th round of all these. I mean, it was just one of these things where we watched him get better. He made some adjustment. And there's people that knew him that could very specifically say, here's what he's doing different. It had to do with his strength and conditioning. But here's what he's doing different. Here's the coach he has. Here's the changes he's made. Charles, aside from the one example of Robbie Lawler, is the only guy that I've seen that's getting better later. And that is what, about this performance in front of everything, made it inspiring.